InertiaJS 2.0 comes with a lot of new features such as polling, prefetching, deferred props, infinite scrolling, and lazy loading data on scroll. It also has an additional feature such as the history encryption API, allowing you to clear page data from history state when logging out of an application. Essentially, what I want to take a look at in this course, because I think that's the most complicated one to implement throughout of all this, is essentially the infinite scrolling. So we have the polling where you can go ahead and use poll and essentially redo, let's say, a request every single time it starts or it finishes. We can also implement throttling here as well if you want to. We have prefetching, which is like wire navigate. It essentially is just enabling us upon hovering a link to load the other page quicker. So it will speed up the process a bit if we use that. We also have something along the lines of deferred props. So for example, you could call permissions and then that will load later on the client side here, where we, for example, have loaded this after the original request has been made, for example, to the controller. You could load that after the controller has been loaded. So this is a neat way if you want to maybe save some time to load certain things. Let's say you have permissions down further on the page, for example. You may want to show the permissions a bit later because naturally the user will look first at the users and the roles, but not the permissions. That's one example. Outside of that, there's also infinite scrolling, which we can do through merging props. That will then take all the props and load it per request when it hits the intersection observer, which is using this WhenVisible in here. And that's essentially some of the new features that's in here. But let's take a look at how we could implement an intersection observer in here for our project. So I've gone ahead and set up a new Inertia project in here with a dashboard page. And in this dashboard page, let's go ahead and set up an intersection observer for a bunch of users. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and make sure we run npm run dev. And then I went ahead and into web.php and let's make a dashboard controller. So PHP and make control dashboard control. Let's make it invocable. And inside this here, we can then add in the dashboard control. All right, so with the dashboard controller created, we can go ahead and create a private function in here, which is going to be called get users. And inside this function, we want to paginate through a bunch of users in here. So we can paginate with, let's say, 10, and then we can go through them and pass through the individual variables we want in here. So user like this, and we just have ID, name, email, and created that. And then up here, what we can do is we can say return inertia render, and then we can say dashboard. We pass through the users, get the items, we get the current page and the last page. And then with that sorted, we can essentially go in here and iterate through them. But before we do that, let's make sure that we can actually create a few users here. So we could say PHP Artisan DB seed, and that will then go ahead and seed the database. But at the moment, we should be able to then go through these. So if you head into the seed inside the database folder here, you can see we create a user factory in here, just one user though. We could go ahead and do this in Tinker as well, in fact. So let's go and say PHP Artisan Tinker. And there we go, we just created 10. And we could create, let's say, 1,000 here. And exit. So now we've created 1,000 users inside this application. That allows us now to go through a bunch of them. So what we want to go ahead and do up here at the top is let's go ahead and say define props. You want users to be an array, current page to be a number, last page to be a number. And then we can get rid of the welcome component in here. We can say import, and let's say head, and when visible from inertia 3 here. And then we can go up here and just iterate through them. So in here, let's go ahead and have a section. Where the class is space y8 and y8. And then we just want to have a div in here with iterating through the users. We can say key is user.id. And for now, let's just put through a user.id and a name. And then for the WhenVisible component, all we need is, because this will act as an intersection observer, all we need is in here is just the ability to get the data, put in the page, current page +1, so that's when we hit the intersection observer, preserve URL, and only users and current page that we accept as params here. And we only show this loading if current page is lower than last page. So let's go ahead and take a look at the application. So in this case, we call this Inertia.js.test. Let's register a user. And we get to the first issue. So this is because Inertia is still in beta, so we need to essentially make sure we upgrade it here, which we can do just by using 2.0 beta 2. And then for the composer.json, we just need to make sure we use 2.0 dev. So all we need to do is just say composer update npm install, and then that should be it. So that will now go ahead and update the application. So this is how I would approach this. We're gonna say npm run dev, and there we go. You can see we just load more and more until we get to 1,000. And that's essentially how we can add infinite scrolling into Inertia 2.0. And you can see this is how the URL looks like. It looks nice and clean. And we could even go ahead and load up to 1,000 here. And it doesn't seem to be lacking much at all. And again, you could have a spinner down here. You don't have to have a loading ... It's really up to you how you want to show this part. And you can see we have just registered 1,012 users here, and that's all we did, which is brilliant. So we have been able to create 1,000 users, load them all using infinite scrolling, and I'll be working more on this infinite scrolling part in my Twitter View 3 course that will be coming out in November, December time, and we can then take a look at how we can actually use it properly and efficiently. So outside of that, the only other thing you may want and wish to implement is, for example, in the welcome component, we could go ahead and say prefetch here. So if we take a look at Inertia 2.0, inside Inertia link, we can just say prefetch. That should then go ahead and essentially speed up the process. So if we go ahead and add that in here, let's log out. And then let's open inspect element. You can see that this then opens up on hover a request made. So instead of doing it upon clicking on it, it essentially speeds up the process. So this is how quickly it goes. This is maybe a bit more difficult to demonstrate upon using something like Inertia 2.0 locally, because it should run a lot faster. But you'll probably notice this more upon using something like on your own application there. You could also implement caching if you wanted to, and we could even defer the props as we looked at as well. I'm not going to go through all of it. It's all in the documentation, but that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you want to see more Inertia 2.0 content, like this, please hit the like and the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.